Hi everyone, welcome back to The Jukebox Goes to the Movies. This week's special edition features our all Beatles movies all week, one a day. And today is time for Magical Mystery Tour. And that's why I'm in my colorful tie-dye, and that's why I am ready with an entire jar of weed to tell you all about this magical mystery movie that makes absolutely no sense. And you'll know in a second why. So the movie, let's just say it's an art film. Okay, it does have a cult following. Paul loves it for its cult following. He loves that it's this little artsy movie. But this is actually made at a time when, the Beatles are going through a lot of upheaval. They lost Brian. They introduced transcendental meditation into their lives. They're just done with Magical Mystery Tour, the album, and really kind of going into the White Album period. Things are changing. Yoko's in the picture. Cynthia has an affair with Magic Alex. I mean, what? So the long and short of it is that this actually is the first time, if I remember correctly, that the Beatles do a swing and a miss. It's not a home run. Why isn't it a home run? Well, the big reason for the film being a failure is simple. The BBC chose to air it on Boxing Day, so December 26th, in black and white. Now, if you've seen Magical Mystery Tour, you know it's a very colorful movie. It is inspired by colorful things like LSD and marijuana and mushrooms. And there's a cardigan that Paul wears in it that I swear is an early Pride icon in and of itself. So it is very shocking and understanding that people didn't get it upon first view on the BBC on Boxing Day in black and white. But in and of itself, it doesn't make sense because at this time, Monty Python's on the air. We've had the Goons. I mean, the film itself is just short vignettes, absurd short vignettes. John has a dream about spaghetti. There's a drill sergeant played by Victor Spinetti, if I remember correctly, this is his third performance in the third original Beatles movie, making him the only actor to be in all three films, like I mentioned in the last one. And there's some really wonderful sing-along and conversational moments on a tour bus that goes through England on this Magical Mystery Tour. Now, this apparently is a tradition in England. You get on a bus and then you go to all these different locations in the countryside and you stop and you eat or have tea or whatever the British do on these. Perhaps a Brit can enlighten us in the comment section. We do have these kinds of tours in North America, but everything is so huge here. Like, everything is so far from itself here. Like, it doesn't make sense to do it the same way they do it in the UK, clearly. So I think a little bit of the disconnect, particularly possibly for North American audiences, is that we don't have that tradition of getting on a bus with a bunch of our friends and even some strangers, and then, getting to know them and taking a tour through the countryside. What I love about the film, though, more than anything, is the performances. First of all, you get an absolutely marvelous, marvelous performance of Your Mother Should Know, with Paul famously wearing a black rose, which, if you know your Paul is dead mythology, thank you very much, that was supposed to signify, that he was not of the living anymore. Whatever. But it's also, as is mentioned in the anthology, the only performance we get of I Am the Walrus, and mighty fine performance it is too. It's a little bit disturbing if you're young, but it is 100% entertaining if you are on a substance. Not gonna lie. The inspiration for the film, other than to be a kind of interesting, modern, youth-oriented take on these coach buses filled with people going through the countryside, is Ken Kesey's memoirs of the Merry Pranksters. And they did their thing along the West Coast, particularly in California, Joshua Tree and all those long, winding desert roads. And the idea was to blend tradition with modernity, like I was saying, which is something the Beatles always did. And you can see that, like I mentioned before, you have Your Mother Should Know, which is this very straight-laced traditional song, paired with this other great performance of I Am the Walrus, which is Lewis Carrollian for its time, and straight out of an LSD trip, and name drops Semolina Pilcher, who is the guy who's framing all of the rock and roll people, including John, George, and Keith and Mick, and all their drug busts. And remember, the Beatles are on a lot of drugs. We covered this already. There's a couple of other cool moments. There's the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band doing a performance in the film. There's also a performance of Neil Innes's Death Cab for Cutie, which you'll recognize both the name Neil Innes as being from the Ruddles and Death Cab for Cutie being an actual band name for a band currently making music. So the movie also features Mal Evans and Neil Aspinall in the film in bit parts, which is wonderful because it means that the Beatles were bringing their entourage finally onto film. Now, the big thing about this is that the film was made in a really haphazard, relaxed way. Brian was gone, okay? The organization isn't really there. Everything is kind of just like, let's get it done, let's get the paycheck. But also, Paul is right there going, hey, we can't give up. Paul is the perpetual cheerleader, and this film is like a cheer meet. It's like an event for the band, and they all show up, even if they're a little too stoned most of the time. The jury is out on if it was a success or not. I think it was. I have a lot of fun watching it, and I hope you do too. And I want to know in the comments what you think of Magical Mystery Tour.